The rain was light but steady as Amir pulled up to the gated house on Whitmore Lane. He double-checked the name on the food delivery app, glanced down at the 2 paper bags of takeout on the passenger seat, and took a deep breath. He'd made 5 stops already that afternoon, and this was supposed to be the last one before his break. He stepped out of the car, hoodie pulled over his head shoes, splashing slightly on the wet driveway. His phone buzzed a message from the customer. "Leave it at the door. Don't knock." Amir nodded to himself. No problem. He walked up the steps, placed the food carefully near the front door, took a photo for proof, and was about to head back when the door suddenly opened. A young man, maybe mid-20s, flashy hoodie, phone in hand, stood there frowning. "You're the delivery guy?" he asked, almost like he didn't believe it. Amir turned politely. "Yes, sir. Your food is right there. I hope it's still warm." "Traffic." The guy cut him off, mimicking in a thick, exaggerated voice. "Yes, sir. Your food is right there." Amir blinked. "Excuse me." The man laughed, waving the phone toward his friend, who was filming from behind the door. "Yo, you hear that, bro? Where are you from?" "Like outer space." The friend snorted behind the camera. "Nah, that's some Martian Uber Eats accent, bro." Amir felt his face flush, a quiet shame rushing through his chest. He'd heard things like this before, in passing, under breaths, in smirks. But never this direct, never with a phone camera pointed at him, like he was part of a skit. He didn't yell. He didn't defend himself. He just said softly, "Have a good day," and walked away. As he got back into his car, he heard one of them shout, "Hey, say something in alien, man." He shut the door and drove off. The car was quiet now, just the sound of the rain on the windshield. Amir gripped the steering wheel, trying to breathe through it. He didn't have the luxury of letting it break him. There were more deliveries to make, more hours to cover. But deep down, something cracked. That night, Amir didn't mention it to his roommate. He heated up leftover rice, called his mother back home in Jordan, and asked about her knee, carefully avoiding the pain in his voice. She didn't need to worry about what it was like here, about how some people only saw him as a joke with an accent. But he couldn't sleep. At 1:30 a.m., he sat at his tiny kitchen table and wrote a short post on a community app. Not to complain, not even to call anyone out, just to tell the truth. He wrote, "Today someone mocked my voice while I delivered their food. I know I speak with an accent. It's because I speak more than one language. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of where I come from. But it hurt. I'm sharing this because maybe someone else out there has felt the same. And maybe we all need a reminder. Respect costs nothing, but means everything." He hit post, then turned off his phone. He didn't expect what would happen next. When Amir woke up the next morning, his phone was buzzing nonstop. Dozens of notifications from the app where he'd shared his story. He rubbed his eyes, confused at first, then sat up and opened the post. There were hundreds of comments, not just from strangers saying they were sorry, but people sharing their own stories. A Vietnamese nurse who said patients often mimicked her pronunciation. An Indian math teacher who had been told to speak English in her own classroom. A Spanish-speaking dad who'd been laughed at while ordering coffee. The post had struck a nerve. By mid-morning, local reporters had picked it up. One of them, a young journalist named Maya Torres, sent Amir a message, "I saw your story. Would you be open to an interview?" Amir stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to say no, to keep it small, private, safe. But another part, the one that remembered standing in the rain being mocked like a punchline, felt something different. Not anger, not shame, but a quiet strength that had been building for a long time. He replied, "Yes, I'll talk." That afternoon, Maya met him in a quiet cafe downtown. She was kind, soft-spoken, and asked thoughtful questions, She didn't push, just listened. And when he told her about the accent, the video, and the walk back to his car, she didn't flinch or look away. "You said something in your post that stuck with me," she said, clicking her pen closed. "Respect costs nothing, but means everything. Can I use that in the headline?" He smiled slightly. "If you think it helps." That evening, the segment aired on the local 6 o'clock news. Amir didn't even know it had gone live until his phone lit up again. Texts from customers, co-workers, neighbors. The anchor introduced the story with a simple line. A delivery driver's voice was mocked by customers. His response is now sparking a much bigger conversation. Then they played the footage of Amir sitting at the cafe, calmly explaining why words matter. Why accents aren't flaws, they're proof of courage. Proof that someone left home, learned a new language, and still speaks with the music of where they came from. Social media exploded. Thousands of shares. Tens of thousands of likes. Local politicians reposted it. Teachers started using it in classrooms as a discussion prompt. And buried under all the praise, a quiet comment from someone anonymous. "That was me. I was the guy at the door. I'm sorry." Amir read it once, then again. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The post had become bigger than him now. By the end of the day, the food delivery company he worked for reached out personally. They apologized, offered to sponsor language equity workshops for both customers and drivers, and to Amir's disbelief, asked if he'd consider being a guest speaker on cultural awareness for their regional training. Amir laughed out loud when he got the message, not because it was funny, but because just 24 hours ago, he was being mocked for the very thing people were now asking him to speak about. That night, he walked into the living room where his roommate Sean was watching TV. "Dude," Sean said, holding up his phone, "you're literally on the news. Like right now." Amir looked at the screen. It was his face talking about kindness. The quiet, nervous man who just wanted to do his job and go home. "I don't know how this happened," he admitted. Sean grinned. "I do. You told the truth." And people finally listened. The days that followed felt surreal. Amir was still delivering food. The same worn-out car. The same GPS voice giving left and right turns. But now people recognized him. When he knocked on doors, customers smiled differently. Some thanked him. Some asked, "Hey, are you the guy from the news?" One older woman even handed him a handwritten note that simply read, "Your voice matters, and so do you." He kept it folded in his wallet, but with the attention came new challenges. One morning, as he waited for a pickup at a local Thai restaurant, a man in a suit approached him outside. "You're that delivery guy, right? The one who cried about being teased?" Amir stiffened. "Excuse me," the man smirked. "Come on. People get mocked all the time. You really needed the whole city to pat you on the back for it." Amir didn't respond. He turned away, fists clenched at his sides. The man walked off, laughing under his breath. It stung not because of the words, but because they echoed every doubt Amir had been carrying for years. That maybe he was too sensitive. That maybe speaking up was making a big deal out of nothing. That maybe if he just stayed quiet, things would have passed. But something deeper in him pushed back. He remembered the thousands of people who had written to say they felt seen. The teacher who said her immigrant students now walked a little taller. The young boy who'd messaged him saying, "I was born here, but people still ask me where I'm really from." "I showed them your video in class." Amir had tapped into something real, and he couldn't let one voice drown that out. A few days later, Maya Torres called again. "I've got something to run by you," she said. "There's a community leadership summit next month. Panel on equity and inclusion. They want you to speak." Amir nearly dropped his phone. "Me?" "Yes, you," Maya laughed. "You've become the face of something bigger, Amir. They want your voice." He hesitated. I'm not a speaker. I'm a driver. You're a storyteller, she corrected. And people listen when you talk. He didn't say yes right away, but he didn't say no either. That night, after another long shift, Amir sat on his balcony with a notepad. The city lights flickered below, and the sound of distant car horns filled the air. He stared at the blank page for a long time before writing just 2 words, "Start here." The speech took shape slowly. He didn't try to sound smart or polished. He didn't force himself into big fancy phrases. He just wrote what he knew, what it feels like to leave your home and start over, what it feels like to be told you don't belong because of how you speak, what it feels like when someone finally hears you, and not just your accent. When the day of the summit arrived, Amir stood backstage, palms sweaty, heart pounding. The auditorium was packed, teachers, city leaders, activists, all waiting. He glanced at the folded paper in his hand, then out at the audience, and when he stepped onto the stage, the room went silent. He started slow. His voice was calm, measured. I came to this country because I believed in opportunity, in hard work, in fairness. But some days it felt like my voice was the only thing people noticed, and not in a good way. He paused, letting the words settle. But then something happened. I was mocked, yes, but I was also lifted, not just by strangers, but by the people who said, "Hey, me too." And that's when I realized my accent isn't a weakness. It's a map. It shows where I've been, what I've survived, and how far I've come. The room erupted in applause. By the time he stepped off stage, people were on their feet. Maya found him backstage. "Told you," she said with a grin. Amir smiled, heart racing. "I've never done anything like that before." "Well, you have now," she said. And it mattered. After the summit, everything changed again. But this time, it wasn't just online buzz or temporary headlines. It was something deeper, more lasting. Amir started getting invitations not from reporters, but from schools, libraries, community centers, places that usually didn't care much about delivery drivers. They wanted him to speak, not as a symbol, but as a voice, a person. He was hesitant at first. He still worked his shifts, still needed to pay rent, still wrestled with self-doubt every time he picked up a microphone. But each time he spoke, someone came up to him after and said, "Thank you." That was my story too. So he kept going. One afternoon, he was speaking at a public high school in a working-class neighborhood, a gym full of teens who at first looked more interested in their phones than anything he had to say. But Amir didn't try to impress them. He just told the truth. "I used to stay silent when people mocked me," he said. "But silence doesn't protect you. It only hides the parts of you worth hearing." Afterward, a young girl in a hijab approached him. "I'm always scared people won't take me seriously because of how I talk," she whispered. Amir crouched to her level and said, "The way you speak is your power. Don't let anyone trick you into thinking it's anything less." The school principal sent him an email later that evening, saying they'd never seen their students so engaged with a guest speaker. She invited him back, not just for a talk, but to lead a workshop for English language learners. Amir sat in his tiny apartment that night, rereading the message, still unsure how all of this was happening. Just a few weeks ago, he was being laughed at on someone's porch. Now, he was being asked to teach others how to stand taller in their own voices. Then something completely unexpected happened. A major news network reached out. They wanted to feature him as part of a series called Voices of America. The producer had read his story online, seen the community response, and believed Amir represented something the country needed more of: resilience, humility, and honesty. The segment was set to air nationwide. Amir stood in front of a camera crew in a small studio, lights blazing, feeling sweat bead at the back of his neck. The interviewer smiled and said, "Just speak, like you're speaking to your future self." What would you want him to remember? Amir took a deep breath. I want him to remember that the world tried to laugh at his voice, but he kept talking anyway. That every time someone tried to push him into silence, he built a platform instead. That dignity isn't about how perfect your words are. It's about the truth inside them. The crew was silent for a moment. Then someone whispered, "That gave me chills." The night the segment aired, Amir was sitting at home with his roommate, a bowl of popcorn between them. The intro music played. Then came the words, "Tonight, we bring you the story of a man whose accent became his strength, and how one moment of mockery turned into a movement." It was surreal seeing his name on the screen, hearing his words replayed, watching video clips of the summit, the classrooms, the kids. By the end of the segment, his inbox was flooded again. This time with messages from across the country: truckers, teachers, nurses, immigrants, students. People who felt seen, heard, valued. But one message stopped him cold. It was from his father, back home, halfway across the world. He rarely texted, and almost never in English. But tonight, he had written simply, "I saw you, you made us proud. Keep going." Amir read it again and again, tears blurring the words. This was more than a viral story, more than redemption. It was healing, not just for him, but for every person who had ever swallowed their voice to make others comfortable. Every person who had ever been told they sounded wrong. And now, Amir knew with certainty he sounded exactly right. Weeks passed, then months. And while the media attention slowly quieted, Amir's story lived on, not as a headline, but as a ripple. He still delivered food, not as often now, but enough to stay grounded. He said it kept him close to the version of himself that started all of this, the one who stood in the rain, mocked for his accent, but chose to walk away instead of retaliate. That choice changed everything. He began developing a community program with Maya's help, a storytelling initiative for immigrants and first-generation youth, where they could write and share their experiences without fear of judgment. They called it Voiced. The first workshop was small. 10 students, one dusty classroom, and a circle of folding chairs. Amir started by reading his own post aloud, the same one he had written months ago. In the dark, at the edge of exhaustion. The words still rang true. Then he said, "You don't need to sound like anyone else to be worth listening to. You just have to be honest." One by one, the students spoke. Some whispered, some cried, some laughed nervously. But they all told the truth about being judged, misunderstood, underestimated, about surviving and showing up anyway. It was messy. It was beautiful, and it was just the beginning. Soon, local schools asked to host voiced workshops. Libraries offered space. Nonprofits donated supplies. A quiet little movement had started, not flashy, not loud, but steady, built from truth. One evening, as Amir was closing up after a session, a teenage boy named Luis lingered by the door. "You really think someone like me could be on the news one day?" he asked. Amir smiled. "You already have a story. The news just hasn't caught up yet." Luis grinned, nodded, and left with his notebook tucked under his arm, like it held something priceless, because it did. Back home, Amir hung a small corkboard on his wall, next to the kitchen. On it were thank you cards, sticky notes, with quotes from students, and a photo of his first delivery bag, worn, creased, but still intact. A reminder. One morning he got a letter in the mail, with no return address. Inside was a printed photo of Amir, standing on stage at the summit, taped beside a screenshot of that original viral post. Written in pen underneath was one line: "Never stop speaking, because people are still listening." Amir placed it on the board. The following week, the mayor's office invited him to speak at an immigrant heritage celebration. A huge event, dozens of community leaders, flags from around the world, hanging in the auditorium. As he stood backstage, a young staffer approached him nervously. "Hey, just wanted to say your story helped me. My mom always hated her accent. I showed her your video. Now she calls it her badge of survival." Amir chuckled. "Tell her I said she wears it well." When he took the stage, he didn't bring notes this time. He spoke from the same place. He always had his heart. He talked about shame and how easily it can settle into our bones when we're made to feel like we don't belong. He talked about pride and how it takes root when you stop apologizing for where you came from. And he talked about choice, that even in the worst moments, we can choose to hold our dignity tighter than our fear. The crowd rose to their feet. Later that night, as Amir stood on the balcony of his apartment, overlooking the city, he thought about that first rainy afternoon. The laughter, the camera, the sting. He thought about how far he'd come, not just in miles, but in meaning. His phone buzzed again, a notification from the voiced program News Story, submitted by student. "The first time I stopped hiding my voice." He smiled, because that's what it had become, a chain of courage, one voice inspiring another. And all of it started because one man refused to let a moment of mockery define him. Instead, he used it to define what comes next. Not silence, but strength.
Subscribe and turn on notifications for inspiring Bible stories and faith-filled wisdom. Comment below. How did this story touch you? Your words can inspire others. Share this video to spread God's hope. Stay tuned for more soul-stirring truths and keep trusting as God's love leads you.